Dias Netzeros is a soldier who has finally left the battlefield after spending many years at war. As a reward, the king grants him his own territory. That sounds wonderful, until Dias discovers that his new domain is nothing but an endless field of grass without a single resident. Apparently, the kingdom expects him to communicate with nature and build a civilization from the ground up. There are no houses, no villagers, and not even a chicken coop to serve as his starting capital. The officials who escort him there openly laugh, as though this empty wilderness is the perfect reward for an orphaned commoner who recently gained status. Dias has technically become a lord, but it feels more like the kingdom dropped him into a field and told him to survive. According to his simple understanding, a lord lives on his land, protects his people, collects taxes, and sends part of the money to the capital. Unfortunately, none of that seems possible when there is not a single person living there. After exploring the territory, Dias discovers that its only obvious advantage is a source of clean water. To him, that alone is extremely valuable. During the war, he sometimes had to drink muddy water simply to stay alive. That night, the new lord sleeps beneath the open sky with the grass as his bed. He decides to remain for another 2 days. If he still cannot find a way to live there, he will search for the nearest village and help people through honest work, following the final lesson left by his parents. The following morning, Dias is suddenly awakened by a mysterious girl with a horn on her forehead. She aims a bow at him with such caution that one suspicious answer may send an arrow directly toward his face. She asks who he is and what he is doing there. Unfortunately, Dias is so painfully honest that every additional explanation only makes the situation more confusing. Finally, the girl asks him a direct and dangerous question. Is he her enemy or her ally? Dias is completely bewildered. They have only just met, yet she already expects him to choose a side. When he sees that the girl is becoming angry, he remembers that a lord is supposed to stand beside the people living on his land. Dias suddenly becomes serious and declares that no matter who her enemy may be, he will protect her. The moment he finishes speaking, the horn on her forehead shines with brilliant blue light. She freezes before the overwhelming sincerity of this man, then grabs his sleeve, tells him to remain quiet, and orders him to follow her. The girl leads Dias to a hidden camp in the middle of the grasslands. Many of the people living there possess horns similar to hers. Dias is shocked because he explored the same region the previous day and noticed no trace of them. She brings him into a large tent to meet an elderly horned woman who serves as the tribal chief. The chief asks what color the girl's horn displayed while Dias was speaking, and she confirms that it remained blue the entire time. For this tribe, the color of a horn appears to reveal whether someone is telling the truth or concealing harmful intentions. Dias introduces himself as the new lord of the region and declares that he will stand beside them because anyone living on this land is one of his people. The moment he mentions the king and his position as lord, however, the atmosphere becomes dangerously tense. The horned girl immediately raises her bow and aims it at Dias again. He remains completely confused, unable to understand which innocent sentence activated the self-destruction sequence. Fortunately, the chief stops her and asks Dias to explain his entire history. Dias's past is gradually revealed. As a child, his parents taught him to help others and protect those weaker than himself. When he was 10, both parents died from an epidemic, leaving him completely alone. Rather than surrendering to despair, Dias gathered other orphaned children. Together, they cleaned the city and hunted weak monsters to earn enough money to survive. When war reached their town at the age of 15, Dias voluntarily joined the army to protect the people around him. He soon discovered that he possessed remarkable talent in combat, achieved victory after victory, and eventually received this barren territory after 20 years of war. The chief realizes that Dias was not sent to suppress them. She asks one final question to test him. If they were not his subjects, would he still stand beside them? Dias answers without hesitation. They are neighbors living on the same grassland, so he would still help them whenever they face trouble. He believes they can become allies regardless of political status. At that moment, the chief's horn also shines blue, confirming that every word comes from his heart. Dias still does not understand why she asked such a strange question. To him, anyone living inside his territory naturally counts as one of his people. The chief finally reveals the truth that leaves him speechless. They are not merely outside his authority, they are enemies of the king and belong to a tribe that fought against Dias's kingdom for many years. Dias began the day as a lord without citizens, and has now discovered that his territory secretly contains an entire tribe once considered an enemy of the nation. His first day in office has already become a complete disaster, and his career as a peaceful frontier lord is clearly not going according to plan. While Dias is still processing the discovery, Chief Mal explains the tribe's history. 50 years earlier, her people fought the kingdom in a great war over control of the grasslands. They were defeated and forced into hiding to survive. Their village remained undiscovered inside Dias's territory because the magical power stored within their horns allows the entire tribe to conceal its presence. In other words, Dias failed to find them not because his eyesight was poor, but because the entire settlement had activated advanced invisibility. Mal also explains the soul appraisal magic within Alna's horn. A red light means the person is dangerous, hostile, or lying. White indicates someone harmless who is not an enemy. Blue is the rarest result, representing a person capable of bringing happiness and blessings. Since the moment Alna met Diaz, her horn has continued shining blue like a magical good luck signal. Combined with his almost complete inability to lie, Maul believes that Diaz poses no threat to her people. After considering the situation, Maul proposes an agreement that will allow both sides to live together. The tribe will lend Diaz shelter, food, and livestock so he can begin his new life on the grasslands. In exchange, Diaz must never reveal the village's existence to anyone, especially the king. He must also prevent political conflict between the kingdom and the tribe from dragging them into another war. Diaz finds the conditions perfectly reasonable. His only intention is to protect everyone living on the land, so he happily accepts. Maul then announces another decision that leaves both Diaz and Alna completely stunned. Alna will remain beside Diaz and teach him how to survive on the grasslands. The two of them will also live together. The phrase "live together" immediately changes the atmosphere. Alna becomes flustered, while Diaz can barely speak. He has been a lord for only one day and has already been assigned a roommate. A nomadic tent is quickly prepared for him. Alna explains that it can be dismantled and moved rapidly whenever danger appears, making it perfect for a tribe that must always remain cautious. She also introduces the meers, woolly livestock resembling sheep. Properly caring for them and increasing the herd will give Diaz a stable source of resources. Diaz enthusiastically asks how he should increase the population of his territory, but Alna quickly brings him back to reality. The current number of tents and supplies is barely enough for Diaz alone. Inviting more settlers now would merely allow everyone to experience starvation together. To solve the food problem, Alna gives him a bag of bait powder and instructs him to scatter a small amount across the grasslands. It will attract wild animals that can be hunted for meat and hides, which can then be exchanged for equipment and additional tents. Diaz confidently accepts because hunting requires far less thought than politics. Unfortunately, he forgets to ask how much powder to use and empties the entire bag onto the ground. The consequences arrive almost immediately. A huge herd of black bulls charges toward him, each creature enormous, aggressive, and seemingly determined to flatten the entire grassland. Diaz does not panic. He grabs his massive axe and charges through the herd using nothing but strength and instinct. He swings continuously, roaring as he defeats one bull after another. Although half the herd escapes, an impressive number of black bulls are left scattered across the field. Only after the battle does Diaz recognize the real problem. Defeating the prey was easy compared with transporting it home. There are no delivery services in the wilderness, so he can carry only one creature back by himself. Sweating heavily beneath its weight, Diaz worries that Alna will look at him with complete disappointment for acting without thinking. Instead, she is amazed when she sees him returning with a black bull. To Alna, defeating such a creature on a first hunting trip is an extraordinary achievement. She does not yet realize that Diaz actually defeated half the herd. Smiling brightly, she runs to prepare a wagon and calls Diaz by his name for the first time. Her reaction surprises him. Maul explains that among their people, a hardworking man who provides for others and handles difficult labor is considered extremely admirable. Women naturally become happier and more interested when such a capable man is nearby. Appearance and charming conversation are secondary. The important question is whether he can actually provide for a household. Maul then casually jokes that the bride price would be rather expensive if Diaz wanted to marry Alna. She adds that the tribe's horns would not prevent them from having children. Diaz turns red and hurriedly denies having such intentions, which naturally makes the teasing far more effective. The following morning, Diaz wakes inside his new tent on the grasslands. For the first time since receiving his territory, he experiences a peaceful beginning to the day without another major shock. Alna is stirring a pot of hot soup in front of him and turns around with a gentle smile to say good morning. Diaz tastes the soup and immediately praises it, causing the atmosphere between them to become noticeably warmer. After breakfast, Diaz and Alna begin discussing a more serious problem: how to transform the empty grasslands into a place where people can genuinely live. Alna explains that before attracting residents, they need at least a proper well and toilets. They cannot continue camping indefinitely and call the result a functioning territory. Unfortunately, they still lack enough goods to exchange for the labor of the tribe's craftsmen. Diaz's dream of developing the land has barely begun before the economy delivers its first painful lesson. He suggests hunting more black bulls because the previous attempt produced excellent results despite the transportation problem. Alna immediately refuses. Hunting one species repeatedly could damage the entire herd and harm the long-term balance of the grasslands. Instead, they can hunt monsters today. Monster meat is filled with miasma and cannot be eaten, but claws, horns, and especially the magic stones found inside their hearts can be sold for high prices. Diaz becomes interested. Alna confidently explains that she can use magic to locate monsters and insists on accompanying him. Before leaving, Diaz carefully brushes the mirrors while repeatedly reminding himself that their value comes from their wool rather than their meat. Watching the new lord treat sheep like national assets is unexpectedly endearing. Soon afterward, 3 horned men arrive with a wagon carrying dried meat and blankets. They treat Alna with great respect. She announces that she asked other men to look after the mirror herd so she can remain beside Diaz for the entire day. Diaz feels pleased until he notices the three men staring at him with enough jealousy to burn through his clothing. Apparently, several of Alna's admirers are not happy that the mysterious newcomer may be stealing the village's most popular woman. Diaz and Alna enter a dark valley surrounded by stone cliffs, completely different from the green grasslands outside. Alna closes her eyes, brings her hands together, and chants a lengthy spell to locate nearby monsters. Her horn begins glowing and she quickly detects an enormous creature. Diaz immediately tells her to remain behind while he investigates. Alna reminds him that she possesses concealment magic. If the enemy is too powerful, they can escape together, so Diaz reluctantly allows her to follow. The moment he sees the target, Diaz calls it a turtle. Alna quickly corrects him. It is not an ordinary turtle, but an earth dragon, an enormous and extremely dangerous monster. She tells Diaz to hide because fighting it alone would be far too reckless. Diaz decides to test its strength anyway. Carrying his enormous axe, he charges forward, leaps into the air, and strikes the earth dragon's shell. The blow looks powerful enough to split stone, yet it fails to penetrate the monster's defenses. Diaz's lion-headed axe is a trophy he once captured from an enemy general. It is exceptionally durable and can even repair minor damage when Diaz focuses his mind. Although each impact shakes the weapon violently, he can continue attacking without stopping. No matter how many times he strikes, however, the earth dragon's shell barely changes. Compared with this monster, yesterday's black bulls suddenly seem gentle and friendly. From a distance, Alna shouts that the miasma surrounding the earth dragon is corroding Diaz's body. He finally realizes the battle is becoming dangerous, admits that he cannot defeat the enormous turtle, and decides to retreat. The earth dragon has no intention of letting them escape. It opens its mouth, gathers heat, and launches a massive fireball. Diaz initially believes the attack is aimed at him. A moment later, he realizes the true target is Alna, who has already collapsed onto the ground. Without hesitation, Diaz rushes forward and places himself between her and the flames, using both his body and his axe to receive the full attack. In that life-or-death moment, he repeats the promise he made the previous day. No matter who the enemy is, he will protect her. The words strike directly at Alna's heart. The man before her is no longer a suspicious lord sent by the kingdom or an awkward soldier who only knows how to swing an axe. He is someone genuinely willing to die to keep her safe. Tears fill Alna's eyes as her emotions finally overwhelm her. With the earth dragon still trying to burn them alive, she shouts through her tears and asks Diaz to marry her. There are no flowers, candles, or romantic music, only an enormous monster attempting to roast them both alive. Even so, the emotional impact could hardly be stronger. Three men from Alna's clan hurry to the cliffside in a panic, searching for her because she has been gone since morning and still has not returned. They are afraid that the young pair may have been attacked by some monster out on the grassland. But the moment they arrive, they freeze at the sight before them. The massive corpse of an earth dragon is lying motionless on the ground. Not far away, Alna is still crying, clinging tightly to Diaz while insisting that he marry her. Diaz has just taken a fireball directly to the face, so his mind has barely recovered. Now he also has to deal with a marriage proposal in the middle of a battlefield. All he can do is gently comfort her, while the horn on Alna's forehead glows bright blue, showing that she is so happy her magic can no longer hide it. News that Diaz has defeated an earth dragon quickly reaches the village. Soon, the entire clan rushes over, cheering loudly and calling him their boss. However, killing the dragon is only half the work. The other half is figuring out how to move a corpse as large as a hill back home. The whole village has to gather horses, carts, and every bit of manpower they can find. They struggle through the night to drag the earth dragon back. Only when morning fully arrives do they finally bring it to the grassland. Diaz watches the noisy scene in confusion, not understanding why everyone is making such a big deal out of it. To him, this was just a failed hunting trip that somehow ended with a dragon corpse. To the villagers, however, their new boss has just opened a legendary resource stockpile in the middle of the plains. Diaz meets with the clan chief, Maul, and asks to trade all the materials from the earth dragon in exchange for digging a well and building toilets. Maul laughs and tells him that one dragon leg alone would be more than enough to pay for both projects. The clan will only take payment for the butchering work. Most of the money from selling the dragon materials will still belong to Diaz. That money will be enough to buy food, build more tents, create storage facilities, and even prepare for Alna's wedding. The moment Diaz hears the word wedding, he immediately asks everyone to stop at that part. But Maul insists that a neighbor capable of killing a dragon must be kept close through a strong bond. If Diaz does not marry Alna, the unmarried women in the village will surely surround him as well. In a place like this, a man who can provide food and defeat dragons is far too rare. Only then does Diaz realize that Alna disappeared a while ago because she has already run home to tell her parents about the marriage. Diaz has only recently become a lord, yet the entire village is already pushing him straight into a wedding before he can fully understand what is happening. Trying to slow things down, Diaz negotiates by suggesting that they become engaged first. Mal explains that her people do not have an engagement custom. Then, she offers a compromise in her own way. They can hold the wedding first, and the matter of living as husband and wife can wait until both of them are ready. Diaz asks for one step back, but Mal calmly moves the whole board forward. When Diaz asks why Mal is helping him so much, she answers honestly. The previous lord was hopelessly incompetent and recently died of illness. If Diaz fails and leaves this land, nobody knows what kind of person the kingdom will send next. That is why the clan wants to invest in Diaz. They want to help him become a good lord who can protect the peaceful life they currently have. Instead of waiting for the kingdom to send another disaster, they have decided to support the most promising person in front of them. Just then, two young men from the village come over to congratulate him. They excitedly say that Alna has found an excellent match as soon as she reached marriageable age. Diaz becomes curious and asks how old she actually is. Then he goes completely still when he learns that Alna is only 15, while he is 35. The 20-year age gap immediately makes Diaz feel as if this relationship is closer to uncle and niece than husband and wife. Before romance can even begin, the legal and moral reality has already hit him hard. Diaz goes to sit alone on a rock and think. He remembers that the kingdom's law requires a person to be at least 18 before marriage. Because of that, he decides to treat the next 3 years as an engagement period and wait until Alna is legally an adult. During that time, Diaz will also learn how to manage his territory, improve himself, and prepare to become a responsible man. For once, he handles the situation calmly and seriously, proving that even though he may be better with an axe than with complicated politics, he still knows when something truly matters. Not long after, Alna runs over with a bright expression. She happily announces that her parents have agreed, then asks Diaz what he wants to eat tomorrow morning. Diaz simply smiles gently and tells her to decide. That night, the whole village holds a great feast to celebrate both the dragon slaying and the couple's future marriage. Diaz keeps correcting them, saying that it is only an engagement for now, but nobody seems to care. Everyone continues raising their cups to celebrate the dragon slayer who has found a wife. After some time, the well and the toilets are finally completed. Several new tents have also appeared around the territory. Diaz proudly looks at the tent he built with his own hands, but one concern still weighs on his mind. How can he get people to actually come and live here? The territory now has a well, toilets, storage space, and even a dragon slayer. Yet when it comes to residents, there is still no real progress. At that moment, Alna runs over and reports that the life detection magic spread across the grassland has spotted a group of monsters approaching from the north. Their numbers are not large and they are not especially big, but Diaz immediately takes up his weapon. He refuses to let them damage the newly built well and toilets, and he cannot allow the mere herd to panic. The citizens still have not found their way to his territory, but somehow the monsters know exactly where to come. Alna wants to go with him and provide support. Diaz worries that if they both leave, the Mir, who have grown attached to them, may wake up alone and become anxious. Alna argues that the two of them will fight more effectively together, so Diaz finally agrees. The two hide behind a rock and quietly observe a giant ogre walking toward the territory. After looking over its rough and filthy appearance, Diaz concludes that the monster has almost no valuable parts. Unlike the earth dragon, which left behind a treasure trove of materials, this ogre looks as though it will only leave behind a cleaning problem. Even without profit, Diaz cannot let it get close to the well, the Mir herd, or the living area. He immediately charges out with his axe, while Alna supports him from behind with her bow, shooting the arm that holds the ogre's weapon. Thanks to their smooth cooperation, Diaz quickly finishes the monster with a strike from his axe. The battle ends cleanly, but his armor is now completely covered in slimy, foul-smelling purple blood. Alna only needs to stand near him for a moment before covering her nose. She immediately orders Diaz to wash himself in the stream before he is allowed to return. And so, after defeating the monster, Diaz has to sit in the water until sunset, desperately scrubbing the blood from his armor. The ogre may not have left behind valuable materials, but it certainly left a strong impression through its smell. The next morning, Diaz draws water from the well and sighs that there are still no citizens in sight. While monsters seem to find his territory with perfect accuracy, just then Alna rushes over in excitement and shouts that there is a pregnancy. Diaz instantly freezes, his expression changing through several emotions in less than 2 seconds. But before he can ask what she means, Alna points toward Francois. It turns out the pregnant one is not Alna, but one of the Mir in the herd. The newly appointed lord has just experienced the feeling of his heart dropping out of his chest and somehow returning by itself. Alna did not say anything wrong, but her way of delivering the information nearly ended his life early. Alna explains that Mir are highly intelligent and sensitive creatures. They can clearly sense fear and pressure around them. Pregnant Mir are especially prone to anxiety, and there have even been cases where panic became dangerous enough to stop their hearts. Because of that, they need someone strong to stay nearby so they can feel safe. In this entire area, nobody is more suitable than Diaz. Diaz does not hesitate. He happily accepts the task of caring for Francois and the rest of the Mir herd. He does not even complain about their smell. Watching him gently stroke each animal, Alna becomes emotional and proudly calls him her husband. While the two are talking, Alna's horn suddenly begins to glow. Her detection magic has sensed about 10 people approaching from the east, the direction of the royal capital. Dias immediately becomes cautious because he has no idea who would be coming to visit him. He tells Alna to hide herself with magic and stay behind to protect the mirror. Then he takes his weapon and walks out into the grassland to greet the unfamiliar group. Soon, a group of 3 cavalrymen and several soldiers appears. The young knight in silver armor cheerfully calls out Dias's name the moment he sees him. Dias quickly recognizes him as Klaus, an old comrade who once fought beside him on the battlefield. The two greet each other warmly. For once, Dias is relieved to see an actual human arrive at his territory without trying to attack his well or leave behind a terrible smell. Klaus explains that he is only responsible for guiding and escorting the group. The person who truly wants to meet Dias is the noble sitting on the horse behind him, a gray-haired young woman with a very dignified presence. Since the group has traveled far and is tired, Klaus asks Dias to bring everyone to his mansion to rest. Dias has no objection and calmly leads them back to his home. However, because of Alna's concealment magic, the visitors see no village and no grand mansion. The only thing in front of them is one lonely nomadic tent standing in the middle of the grassland. Klaus looks at the tent, then looks at Dias. He seems to be silently wondering whether his old friend was appointed as a lord or abandoned in a wilderness survival trial. Inside the tent, the gray-haired woman formally introduces herself as Diane, the 3rd princess of the kingdom. Diane cannot hide her confusion when she sees that Dias is still living in a tent. She asks where the mansion is being built and where all the servants have gone. One of the knights accompanying her becomes angry and criticizes Dias for speaking too casually to the princess. But Dias simply explains honestly that there is no mansion and no servants here. There is only the tent he worked hard to build himself. He even looks rather proud as he says it, as if he is showing off a fine residence. His answer leaves both Diane and Klaus speechless. Diane immediately asks where the builders are, because the king supposedly granted Dias a large reward and a huge amount of preparation funds. Hearing this, Dias can only sit there in stunned silence. He has never received even a single coin from the kingdom. Klaus also begins to look angry on his friend's behalf. The king did send money, but it clearly never reached Dias. Somewhere along the way, that money must have found a different pocket. Under Princess Diane's shocked gaze, Dias confirms that he never received any reward or preparation funds. On his first day in the territory, he even had to sleep outside while wondering where he would go to earn food if he could not survive here. He was appointed as a lord, but the support he received felt more like being dropped into an empty map and told to gather resources on his own. After hearing this, Diane understands that something is clearly wrong, but instead of investigating the missing funds immediately, she sets the matter aside and explains the true purpose of her visit. The royal capital is facing the risk of a new war, and she wants the national hero Dias to return to the front lines and help. To make the offer more attractive, Diane promises to grant him a marriage with one of the 2 women sitting behind her. She presents it as if she is offering a great reward, completely unaware that Dias was nearly pushed into marriage by an entire clan just the day before, and is now waiting until Alna is old enough to legally marry. Dias listens to the proposal, but what comes to his mind is Francois and the mere herd that need his protection. He gently refuses. He says that he has already left the battlefield and that he currently has no people or soldiers to command. Technically, he does have a herd of mere, but taking them to the front line would help no one, and probably terrify them. Diane refuses to accept his answer and keeps pressuring him to reconsider. Once Dias realizes that the princess has no intention of respecting his decision, his expression turns cold. He bluntly tells them that if this is all they came to discuss, then they may leave. The royal party traveled all this way to invite him back to war, only to be politely shown the exit by the host. The rude knight accompanying Diane immediately becomes furious that Dias would speak that way to the princess. Without warning, he draws his sword and strikes down toward Dias's head. Dias remains seated with his legs crossed. He raises his axe with one hand and blocks the attack. The impact instantly shatters the sword and sends the knight flying out of the tent. Dias calmly comments that the attack was far too immature, not even strong enough to be called killing intent. The young knight wanted to defend the princess's honor, but the only thing he managed to lose was his weapon. Klaus quickly rushes in to stop his companion from causing more trouble. He also warns them that even if the entire group attacked together, they still could not defeat Dias. That information would have been useful before anyone drew a sword. Diane has no choice but to withdraw. Before leaving, she swears that one day Dias will regret this, but Dias is not especially concerned about her threat. What worries him more is that his axe strike has torn the rug inside the tent, and Alna will definitely not be happy when she finds out. When Dias steps outside, he immediately sees Alna waiting for him. She admits that the mirror kept crying for him, so she used concealment magic to bring them closer. While doing so, she also watched the entire conversation. Dias thought he had been secretly receiving royal guests, but in reality, there was already an invisible audience outside. Alna explains that her soul appraisal magic confirmed that the women in the royal party all gave off a red color, representing danger and hostility. Only one person carried a deep blue color, and that person was Klaus. Dias asks whether that color means Klaus sees them as allies. Alna closes her eyes and smiles softly, saying that it no longer matters because they are family now. Those simple words put Dias completely at ease. He also remembers that Klaus has always been a good comrade, someone who never looked down on his orphan background and was always reliable on the battlefield. No grand speech is needed. After so many years of war, Diaz has finally found a place that truly feels like family. The next morning, Alna detects another person approaching from the east. Diaz assumes it is just a lost traveler and goes out to check, while Alna secretly follows with the mirror under concealment magic. The person who appears this time is Klaus, but he has removed all of his knight armor. Klaus cheerfully announces that he has just been dismissed from the army. Diaz immediately worries that his old friend has been punished because of what happened yesterday, but Klaus explains that this is exactly the result he wanted. He did not want to be sent back to the front lines in the coming war. Most people submit a resignation if they want to quit. Klaus simply arranged things so his superiors would dismiss him first. Then Klaus seriously asks Diaz to hire him as a soldier for the territory. Diaz knows Klaus's skill and character very well, but he still hesitates because this land holds the secret of the Horned Clan. At that moment, Alna releases her concealment magic and suddenly appears with the entire mirror herd in front of Klaus. She says that she does not object because Klaus has carried a deep blue color from the very beginning. Seeing a horned girl and a herd of Mir suddenly appear in the grassland, Klaus can only stare in shock. He probably expected to join a small frontier territory, not discover a hidden community protected by magic. With Alna's approval, Diaz smiles and accepts his old friend. He tells Klaus to follow him back and says he will explain everything slowly. Lord Diaz's territory has gained a new resident, starting from absolutely nothing. After all this effort, the population has finally reached one. It may not be enough to build a kingdom yet, but at least Diaz now has someone he can officially call his subject. Klaus has barely joined the territory when he is treated to a generous feast. As he wolfs down the food, he enthusiastically praises Alna, declaring that she will undoubtedly make a wonderful wife. Alna immediately turns red, while Diaz clears his throat and reminds the new recruit to remember the proper distance between a lord, his wife, and a subordinate. Still pleased by the compliment, Alna quietly brings Klaus another serving of meat. The final warning, however, comes not from Diaz, but from Francois. Acting as translator for the Mayar flock, Alna explains that anyone who wants to eat must also work. A newcomer who contributes nothing should expect nothing in return. Being lectured about responsibility by a pregnant sheep during his first meal is not exactly how Klaus imagined his new life beginning, but he quickly promises that he will not disappoint either of them. Before the food is even settled, Alna's horn begins glowing. Her detection magic senses 12 people approaching, one of whom is rapidly weakening. Diaz immediately puts on his armor and prepares to leave. Klaus eagerly offers to accompany him, but Diaz orders him to remain behind and protect the Mir flock. If both the Lord and the territory's mage leave the tents, someone must stay behind to guard everything they own. While Diaz and Alna conceal themselves within the grasslands, Klaus watches the eastern horizon and thinks about the growing crisis in the capital. The struggle for the throne between the princes and princesses is becoming more violent, and he knows it is only a matter of time before the conflict reaches the borderlands. Not long afterward, Diaz returns with neither soldiers nor assassins, but a group of exhausted elderly refugees. One old woman is barely conscious and receives treatment immediately. They come from Kazdex, where years of internal conflict have destroyed homes and depleted food supplies. The local lord reduced the number of mouths he had to feed by driving the elderly from the territory. Their guide is May, a 90-year-old fortune teller who used her abilities to find the one path that might keep them alive. Diaz is openly delighted to hear that his territory may soon gain 12 new residents. Klaus, however, approaches the situation more practically. Most of the refugees are elderly and unable to perform heavy labor, which means they may become a burden on a settlement that already possesses very little. Diaz disagrees. The experience accumulated over a lifetime is priceless, and as long as they still wish to live and need somewhere safe, he will welcome them. Alna also reminds Klaus that Francois and the Mir flock chose Diaz because he was the strongest and most trustworthy leader they could find. Once the Lord has made his decision, there is little reason to argue. Watching Diaz accept people abandoned by their own homeland pulls Klaus back into memories of the battlefield. Years earlier, his unit had been ordered to retreat even though civilians remained trapped in the evacuation zone. Klaus protested, furious that the soldiers were prepared to abandon them. Then Diaz emerged from the flames, carrying a frightened child in one arm, while gripping his battle axe in the other. The child clung to him and begged not to be left behind. Diaz simply smiled and promised that he would protect them. Seeing his companion return to certain death because he heard one child crying, Klaus charged back into battle to hold off the enemy. His memories afterward are fragmented. Swinging blades, falling soldiers, and the thought that dying heroically beside Diaz would be a worthy ending. Only now does Klaus understand how wrong that idea was. To protect others, he must first survive. A beautiful death cannot build houses, care for refugees, or help Diaz create a land where no one is abandoned. From that moment forward, Klaus gives up his obsession with martyrdom. He will live, and he will use his sword to defend this territory. That night, he rolls up his sleeves and helps Diaz build additional tents until morning. Several days later, Diaz looks across the growing collection of tents and residents and realizes that the territory can finally be called a village. The elderly women repeatedly thank him for giving them shelter. They promise that once cotton or other materials become available, they will help produce cloth for the settlement. The next challenge is choosing a name. One woman suggests Diaz Village, while Klaus enthusiastically proposes Dragonslayer Village. Alna immediately rejects both ideas, especially the second one, which sounds far too dramatic and would attract unnecessary attention. She instead suggests Ilk, an ancient word meaning the first village. The name is simple, meaningful, and perfect for a community built from nothing. The grassland that once held only wind and silence now has a name its people can call home. After the meeting, May asks Diaz to remain behind and carefully suggests selling some of the Earth Dragon materials to purchase slaves as additional residents. Diaz's expression darkens instantly. During the war, he witnessed countless enslaved people forced to serve as living shields before being abandoned among the dead. He firmly declares that owning, buying, or selling another person will be completely forbidden within his territory. May smiles. The suggestion was only a test. She despises slavery as much as he does and would have tried to change his mind had he accepted. With tears in her eyes, she explains that the people of Kazdex treated hunting slaves as entertainment. Her group spent years fleeing from such men and could not entrust their future to another lord who shared the same values. Diaz's answer finally puts her at ease. Ilk may be poor, but no human being will ever become merchandise within its borders. As the conversation settles, Alna announces that a merchant caravan is approaching. Soon, a large group of wagons escorted by canine guards enters the territory. Their leader is Peijin, a frogfolk merchant. Alna examines him with her horn and sees white light, confirming that he carries no hostile intent. Peijin has come to purchase the Earth Dragon materials and is stunned when he learns that Diaz killed the creature alone. To remove any remaining doubt, Diaz performs a short demonstration with his battle axe, leaving the merchant staring with his mouth wide open. Peijin immediately agrees to purchase everything and orders his people to unload food, cloth, wooden barrels, and other essential supplies. Ilk has barely received its name and has already established its first trade route. Just when everyone believes the transaction is complete, Peijin brings forward two small blonde twin girls. Their clothes are torn and their eyes are empty and guarded. The way he presents them makes Diaz believe he is witnessing the sale of children. His hands tighten and the pressure radiating from him becomes so intense that May has to quietly remind him to remain calm. Peijin quickly explains the truth. In the twins' homeland, children born as twins are considered a terrible omen and are traditionally executed while still very young. Their parents refused to accept that fate and fled the country carrying both daughters. The journey slowly destroyed their health. When they realized they would not survive much longer, they turned to Peijin as their final hope. They gave him all the money they had saved and formally entrusted the girls to him as merchandise. They understood that a merchant might abandon an act of charity that produced no profit, but would be less likely to discard goods that had already been fully paid for. It was the only way they could think of to ensure their children survived. Peijin complains that the arrangement has cost him far more than he could ever recover, yet the fact that he protected the girls throughout the journey proves that he is far kinder than he pretends. Alna quietly examines the twins with her horn. Brilliant blue light fills the air. The children carry no curse or ill fortune. On the contrary, both possess the signs of a blessing. Diaz studies them for a long moment before announcing that he will adopt them. He will repay every expense Peijin incurred using Earth Dragon materials, but makes it absolutely clear that the payment is not the price of slaves. It is compensation for the man who cared for them after their parents could no longer do so. Diaz gently lifts both girls into his arms. They are thin and far too light, probably no more than 3 or 4 years old. He softly asks their names, but receives only silence and suspicious stares from children who have learned to protect themselves from every adult they meet. Diaz does not become impatient. He changes the question, speaking slowly and gently, trying to loosen each layer of fear. When he finally suggests giving them new names if they no longer have any, both girls react immediately and shake their heads. The younger twin with shorter hair finally whispers that her name is Aihan and that her older sister is Senai. Diaz repeats both names carefully and promises that he will never replace them. The determination with which the girls protect the names their parents gave them proves that they have never forgotten their family. Watching from nearby, Klaus suddenly remembers that before the war, Diaz cared for many orphaned children, almost like a father. Those experiences taught the scarred warrior something important. At this moment, the twins do not need endless questions. They need patience, kindness, and the feeling of safety they lost long ago. After bathing and receiving clean clothes, Sinai and Ihan look healthier, but they remain frightened and withdrawn. Alna finally approaches and explains the meaning of their names in the ancient language. Sinai means beautiful as moonlight, while Ihan means the sacred moon. She gives each child a pendant carved with the image of the moon. Her words unlock emotions the twins have been holding back. Memories of their gentle mother and the father who wanted only for them to live happily come rushing back. Sinai and Ihan burst into tears and begin calling for their parents. Dias and Alna immediately embrace them, softly explaining that they have already endured more than enough and will never again have to suffer alone. Francis and Francois move closer as well, allowing the girls to bury themselves in their warm wool. In the end, the Mirflock proves more effective at comforting children than any carefully prepared speech. 10 days later, Senai and Ihan can smile, complain, and even fight over the final piece of steamed potato. When Ihan loses, Dias tries to break off half of the potato he has already bitten and give it to her. Alna immediately stops him because sharing is good, but basic hygiene still matters. One parent is responsible for spoiling the children, while the other keeps everyone alive and clean. The small family of Ilk is beginning to function surprisingly well. At that moment, Alna's horn begins glowing again. A lone rider is approaching. Since the Mirflock has become completely attached to the twins, Dias leaves the girls under the protection of their four-legged guardians before putting on his armor and carrying his axe outside. The visitor is Camerat, steward to Eldon Kazdex, the newly appointed lord of the neighboring territory. Alna remains hidden and confirms that his soul appears white, meaning he has no immediate hostile intent. Camerat requests permission for his master's party to enter the settlement, but Dias refuses without hesitation. He does not want unknown guests approaching Ilk. Eldon is the second son who recently won the civil war in Kazdex, and rumors claim that he keeps a large number of female slaves. Before long, an extravagant carriage appears across the grassland. The round-bodied Eldon steps outside, surrounded by several veiled women. The new lord cannot hide his surprise at what he finds. On one side stands a man who emerged victorious from a war for power, accompanied by servants, guards, and a luxurious carriage. On the other stands a man who built a territory from grass, tents, sheep, and people rejected by the rest of the world. The meeting has not even begun, yet the difference between the two lords has already introduced them more clearly than words ever could. Eldon Kazdex arrives on the grasslands with an entire convoy and a large group of attendants, but Dias firmly refuses to let them approach Ilk village. His caution does not come from Eldon being the neighboring lord. It comes from rumors claiming that the man keeps numerous female slaves. Ilk village is sheltering many people who were once abandoned or persecuted, so Dias cannot allow someone suspected of supporting slavery to enter without question. Remaining concealed nearby, Alna uses the soul appraisal power of her horn to examine Eldon. The result is completely different from the rumors. A powerful blue light surrounds him. It is not as intense as Dias's, but it is more than enough to prove that the visitor carries none of the malice they expected. The moment Eldon sees Dias, he abandons his attendants and runs directly toward him. He bows, introduces himself as Eldon Kazdex, and admits that he has admired the hero who saved the nation since childhood. Believing Dias may be angry with him, Eldon apologizes repeatedly. Dias explains that he merely wanted to guarantee the safety of his villagers. Hearing this nearly brings Eldon to tears. Dias even suggests that they address each other by name to make the conversation easier. The tension created by the approaching convoy quickly fades after only a few sincere words. Eldon suddenly turns toward the empty space beside Dias and asks who is hiding there. Realizing she can no longer remain unseen, Alna reveals herself. Dias introduces her as his fiancée, while Alna quietly corrects him by saying, wife. The single softly spoken word is still enough to make Dias freeze. Eldon notices the horn on her forehead and asks whether Alna is a demi-human. Their conversation establishes that the term refers broadly to races that resemble humans, meaning Alna can also be classified that way. The moment Eldon learns that the hero he respects has chosen a future wife from another race, he throws his arms around Dias and begins crying loudly. Eldon asks whether the two of them already have children. Dias says no, while Alna calmly announces that she wants 10 in the future. Dias adds that they are currently raising Senai and Ihan, two young girls from the same race as Alna. Learning that his admired hero not only loves a demi-human but has also taken in 2 demi-human orphans overwhelms Eldon completely. His ears suddenly grow larger, his nose stretches into an elephant's trunk, and his entire body loses strength before collapsing. His female attendants immediately carry him into the carriage and begin treating him. Only then does Camerat reveal that the neighboring lord is a half demi-human with the blood of the elephant people. Eldon can shift between a human appearance and a form displaying elephant-like features. However, whenever powerful emotions trigger the transformation, the strain places his health under severe pressure. The women constantly surrounding him are not members of a harem. They remain nearby because they understand his condition and know how to care for him. After recovering, Eldon apologizes for losing control. Dias does not mind and instead asks directly about the civil war in Kazdex. Eldon says only that he took up arms to protect those precious to him. Camerat then begins recounting the past that outside rumors have completely distorted. The former lord, Enkars, already had a wife and children. His eldest son inherited both his appearance and his terrible personality. Strangely, Enkars became especially fond of a handsome child born to an elephant woman slave. He publicly acknowledged the boy as his son and granted him noble status. That child was Eldon. At 5 years old, Eldon finally learned the truth of his bloodline and discovered that his biological mother was still being treated as a slave. From then on, mother and son could meet only in secret. Eldon also began quietly helping other oppressed demi-humans. His belief that all races deserved equal treatment was therefore formed during childhood. The women caring for Eldon were also once slaves. After he rescued them, they voluntarily remained by his side because they believed in the world he wanted to create. The rumor that Eldon surrounded himself with female slaves was therefore completely false. When Encars discovered that Eldon was secretly protecting demi-humans and attempting to eliminate discrimination within Kazdex, he threatened to kill Eldon, murder his mother, and exterminate every demi-human in the territory. Faced with that threat, Eldon had no path left except resistance. He began an uprising, united humans and demi-humans under the same cause, and defeated Encars' faction. The civil war did not begin because Eldon desired political power. It began because he wanted to save the people he loved. Diaz finally understands why Eldon became so emotional after seeing his family. Ilk village is still poor, but humans, Oni, orphaned children, and Mirs already live beside one another as members of the same household. It is the exact image Eldon has dreamed of creating. Once he calms down, Eldon explains that Diaz's fame has already spread across Kazdex. Stories claim that he reforms nobles with his iron fists, destroys armies numbering in the tens of thousands, and has even become the subject of stage plays in the royal capital. The more Diaz hears, the less he recognizes the man being described. Eldon does not believe every rumor, but the stories told by numerous veterans and their meeting today have only strengthened his respect. Eldon formally asks Diaz to become his friend. He wants them to work toward a world in which humans and demi-humans can live happily together. Diaz does not sign an alliance or promise military support. He simply says that Eldon's ideal is deeply admirable. In Ilk village, that dream has already started becoming reality, and Diaz also hopes the same sight will one day spread much farther. He accepts Eldon's friendship and encourages him to stand proudly, because there is nothing shameful about the path he has chosen. The words leave Eldon close to tears, relieved to have finally met someone who truly understands him. Once both sides understand each other's circumstances, Diaz asks how he can attract more residents to Ilk village. He previously asked merchants to spread the word, but simply waiting is clearly not enough. Eldon promises to announce the recruitment effort throughout Kazdex. However, he warns that the more urgent problem is food. Ilk village must begin stockpiling supplies and developing the ability to produce its own food before winter arrives. Increasing the population without enough to feed everyone would only create a greater crisis. Diaz takes the advice seriously. Eldon promises to provide whatever support he can before leaving the grasslands with his convoy. When Diaz and Alna return to the tents, they find Sanai and Ihan waiting beside the Mir herd. The moment they see him, the girls run forward and complain that Diaz promised to return immediately but made them wait far too long. They call him a liar, then charge alongside the Mirs and knock their adoptive father flat onto the grass. Diaz offers no resistance and obediently apologizes. That night, Sanai and Ihan finally sleep peacefully beside one another, their hands still tightly clasped. Watching them, Alna asks whether Diaz's refusal to punish them will only encourage even more mischief. Diaz admits that their behavior was wrong, but he was the one who broke his promise first. He wants to apologize before correcting them. Children who have recently lost their parents often act spoiled or troublesome to test whether their new family will abandon them as well. He can accept that reaction today. If they continue behaving the same way tomorrow, however, he will establish firm boundaries. Alna understands that Diaz is not indulging them without limits. He is rebuilding their trust. Diaz then mentions that he worked as a farmer before the war and wants to attempt growing crops. Alna looks across the grass-covered plains and wonders whether the land will cooperate with that ambition. Their discussion is interrupted when Alna's horn suddenly begins glowing. She senses a large group approaching from a direction different from the route Eldon's convoy used. An armed party is silently crossing the grasslands in the middle of a moonless night, making their hostile intentions obvious. Diaz wants Alna to remain behind, but she firmly insists on accompanying him. Without tracks or light, he would struggle to locate anyone alone, while her sensory and concealment magic are especially useful in darkness. Klaus is assigned to protect Sanai and Ihan. Diaz and Alna then disappear into the night. Out on the plains, a group of cloaked mercenaries advances by torchlight while checking a compass. Their light-haired female leader reminds them that they were paid generously and therefore have no right to complain. They specifically chose a moonless night because their target is Diaz, the national hero who would be almost impossible to defeat in daylight through a direct confrontation. Several members still claim that the stories about him must be exaggerated. The woman warns them not to underestimate Diaz. She also orders them to kill Eldon if they encounter him. The reward is 100 silver coins for Eldon's life and an additional 10 gold coins for Diaz. The moment money is mentioned, the entire group becomes enthusiastic, unaware that the darkness is about to transform into a cage around them. A streak of red light cuts through the night. Lyle is struck by an arrow and collapses. The leader immediately orders everyone to fire toward the light, but it disappears before their arrows land in the grass. Their enemy releases only a few shots, yet almost none of them miss. The mercenaries cannot understand how every person's location has been identified so accurately. They fire randomly in an attempt to force their attacker into making noise. When the grass moves in the distance, several swordsmen split from the formation and charge toward it. At that moment, the lion-headed blade of Dias's battle axe suddenly appears directly before them. He emerges from the darkness, knocks the first man aside, and strikes down the others before they can properly turn their weapons. Within seconds, 4 mercenaries have lost the ability to fight. The leader panics and orders everyone to regroup, but the formation has already collapsed. Alna appears from another direction before disappearing again through concealment magic. The intruders finally realize that Alna is controlling the battle from a distance while Dias attacks every weakness the moment it appears. One male mercenary sees the blue eyes, iron armor, and enormous battle axe clearly enough to recognize the man before him. He admits in terror that even 100 gold coins would not make this worth the risk, yet still raises his sword and charges. Dias blocks the attack directly, overwhelms him in a single exchange. While the others are being subdued, the silver-haired woman immediately escapes toward a nearby forest. She curses her useless companions, knowing that being discovered by Dias means the plan has already failed. The moment she stops behind a tree, an old wound suddenly flares through her body and forces her to collapse in pain. The agony triggers a dark memory. A noble-looking man boasts about his power and mocks Dias as a commoner who gained a small amount of status yet dared to oppose him. He also speaks of a humiliation he once suffered because of Dias and swears revenge. The memory is too fragmented to establish whether he hired the mercenaries or whether the hatred is directed at someone else. Back on the grasslands, most of the mercenaries have been disarmed and forced to kneel in a line. Dias checks Alna first. An arrow merely grazed her cheek. Alna apologizes because she instinctively made a sound when the arrow passed, revealing her hiding place. Dias does not blame her. He turns toward the prisoners and says they should now understand how foolish their actions were. One man attempts to argue that they are mercenaries rather than bandits, but the moment Dias's expression turns cold, he immediately falls silent. As the lord of the territory, Dias sentences every captured attacker to exile. Alna considers the punishment far too lenient because they entered the plains carrying weapons with the intention of killing him. Dias admits that seeing the injury on her cheek made him extremely angry. However, no one on their side was killed, and the damage was not serious enough for him to justify executing people in retaliation. If the prisoners genuinely regret their actions, exile is sufficient to end the incident. Should they return and cause trouble again, his acts will not show the same mercy. Everyone understands that Dias could have killed them whenever he wished, so no one dares object. Alna is still disappointed that the silver-haired woman escaped, but the sight of the confiscated swords, bows, armor, and maces quickly improves her mood. Dias does not understand why a collection of old weapons seems so valuable. Alna explains that iron is an important resource on the grasslands. Even damaged weapons can be melted down and turned into farming tools. Capturing bandits may also earn a bounty from the tribal chief. Alna's family was once poor, so she always dreamed of hunting down a large bandit group. Unfortunately, the grasslands were so peaceful that criminals were rare enough that she had to wait for them to arrive on their own. The subject reminds Alna of the first time she sensed the carriage carrying Dias into the region. She was secretly delighted because she believed bandits had finally appeared. Instead, the carriage quickly departed and left a single man lying alone in the middle of the grasslands. Alna assumed Dias had been abandoned there to die. When she returned the next morning, she found him sleeping peacefully outdoors. She used soul appraisal and saw an incomprehensibly powerful blue light surrounding him, completely contradicting her initial suspicion. Alna admits that she briefly considered dealing with Dias and selling his axe and armor for money, but ultimately chose not to do so. What still confuses Alna is that she could easily have ignored the stranger and returned to the village. Yet before she fully realized what she was doing, she had already approached Dias, awakened him, and asked whether he was an enemy or an ally. Even now, Alna does not understand why she felt such a strong desire to speak with him. The result of the appraisal reduced her suspicion, but it does not fully explain that choice. She knows only that the decision led to her current life beside Dias, the 2 young girls, and the mere herd. Dias was once a lonely man, abandoned in the middle of the plains. Now he has a village and a family waiting for him. That alone is enough to prove that Alna's choice back then was not a mistake. Returning to the present, Alna looks at Dias as the horn on her forehead begins glowing with emotions that are becoming increasingly difficult to conceal. She imagines stepping closer and kissing his cheek, but the kiss exists only inside her thoughts. Alna immediately turns bright red, spins around, and runs away. Dias has no idea what just happened. He sees only that she suddenly fled, so he calls after her, lifts his axe, and runs in pursuit. The hero capable of defeating an entire mercenary group remains completely helpless before Alna's feelings. The episode ends with Alna still unable to express what she wants, while Dias continues chasing her across the dark grasslands. After defeating the mercenaries who secretly entered the grasslands at night, Diaz believes Ilk village can finally enjoy some peace. However, a lord's enemies do not always carry swords. Sometimes the greatest threat is hunger with winter approaching. If the village continues relying only on hunting and food purchased from outside, its growing population will eventually become impossible to support. Diaz therefore decides to attempt farming on grasslands everyone considers unsuitable for cultivation. Alna knows very little about agriculture. The demon people mainly gather medicinal herbs growing naturally, while every attempt to cultivate vegetables or food crops has ended in failure. The two consult Chief Mal, who shows Diaz a type of colorful mineral called humus stone. Grinding it together with animal bones and mixing the powder into soil can keep medicinal herbs alive inside pots, but vegetables still refuse to grow. Diaz asks what causes the problem, but Mal can only shake her head. She suddenly remembers stories about the forest people, a race said to understand plants better than anyone. Legends claim that even barren land becomes covered in greenery wherever they pass. Unfortunately, Mal has never met them and is not even certain they truly exist. For now, it is only a rumor rather than a practical solution. Diaz still decides to continue experimenting. If he discovers a successful method, he will share it with the tribe because the future food supply concerns everyone living on the grasslands. The serious discussion suddenly changes direction when Mal brings up increasing the population. She says the entire tribe is eagerly waiting for Diaz and Alna to have children, and even offers medicinal herbs if they need assistance. Diaz immediately refuses and asks her never to secretly give Alna anything. He came here to grow vegetables, not begin another kind of population project. Diaz quickly takes the bag of humus stones and leaves before the conversation can become even more dangerous. Back in the village, Diaz proudly shows the colorful stones to Klaus, Senai, and Ihan. To him, they look almost like gemstones. The two girls examine them for only a few seconds before losing interest. The stones contain almost no mana and cannot absorb magical energy, making them no different from ordinary rocks in their eyes. Alna explains that someone unable to sense mana, such as Diaz, can easily be deceived by their attractive appearance. Senai and Ihan recognize their true nature immediately. The girls can sometimes detect magical traces so faint that even Elna overlooks them, revealing enormous potential as future mages. Diaz does not pressure either child to follow a particular path. He is simply happy that so many possibilities remain open to them. He begins crushing the humus stones into powder for the first experiment, but before he can carry it outside, Alna's horn begins glowing. She senses a large group approaching from the east, accompanied by numerous creatures. Diaz intends to investigate alone, but Alna insists on joining him so she can detect and identify anything unusual. Out on the grasslands, they discover a large caravan led by Camarote, one of Eldan's retainers. The wagons are packed with supplies, while a herd of pure white bulls walks at the front. Diaz begins to relax until he notices movement among the cargo. Rather than attacking immediately, he decides to wait until the caravan comes closer and ask Camarote directly. Hidden among the sacks and wooden crates is a group of small beastmen with long ears and rodent-like tails. One member wearing glasses explains that slave hunters previously captured him. After escaping, he secretly climbed onto the wagon because he believed it was traveling toward the southern desert. Unfortunately, he can read but has no sense of direction, and the caravan was traveling the exact opposite way. The others refused to leave because they deliberately came looking for Diaz, the man who killed the Earth Dragon. They intend to defeat him and restore the pride of the desert people. The more aggressive members believe humans are weak and dishonest. By killing the Dragon Slayer, they plan to steal food and transportation before returning south. Their hatred has been encouraged by an unidentified cloaked man, although there is currently no evidence connecting him to the previous attack. The bespectacled beastman continues warning the others that Diaz is even more dangerous than the dragon he defeated. When the caravan stops, Camarot bows and explains that he has brought the supplies Eldon promised. Diaz thanks him and is about to ask about the movement inside the wagons when the desert people hear his name. Believing the Dragon Slayer has lowered his guard, they burst from the crates and charge. Diaz pauses in surprise because this is his first time seeing talking creatures resembling small rodents. Alna reacts faster than everyone else. She swings her bow to knock down the leader, turns, and stops the remaining attackers before they can reach Diaz. She does not kill anyone because she still does not know whether they are passengers, cargo, or intruders. Their identities must be established before anyone decides to take a life. One attacker continues charging and suffers the same result. Realizing that the plan has failed, the group turns and attempts to escape, only to run directly into Camarot's canine beastman guards. The fugitives are quickly captured and stuffed into sacks. They continue shouting that they belong to no one and insult Alna for interfering. Diaz immediately places the head of his axe in front of her and coldly declares that Alna is a wonderful woman whom no one is permitted to insult. The person most affected by his words is Alna herself. Her fierce expression disappears as her entire face turns red. Camarot orders his guards to restrain every troublemaker and apologizes. Despite their reckless actions, they are still considered subjects under Kazdex's authority. Camerot explains that races possessing their own culture, language, and intelligence are classified as beastmen even when their appearance closely resembles animals. Beastmen are themselves considered a branch of the demi-human races. Outsiders often call the small group before them big-eared Jerboa people, but they prefer the name desert folk. Their homeland lies far to the south. Many were once captured by slave hunters before Eldon rescued them. He promised that after becoming a lord, he would return them to their homeland. The civil war has now ended, and Eldon is finally preparing to fulfill that promise. However, their history of enslavement has made them deeply suspicious of humans. They do not even trust Eldon completely. Dias chooses not to punish them further and entrusts their supervision and return journey to Camerot. A meeting that nearly became an international incident involving a battle axe is resolved through conversation instead. Camerot then gives Dias a letter and a complete list of the delivered goods. Dias had only requested a few farming tools during his previous meeting with Eldon, yet the caravan contains local spices, construction supplies, wagons, draft horses, and enough equipment to make it seem as though Kazdex is establishing a new branch in the middle of the grasslands. Eldon's letter explains that everything is a gift of friendship and expresses his hope that both territories will continue exchanging resources and supporting each other. The gifts even include a carriage and 4 horses. Knowing that horses without shelter would create another problem, Eldon sent prepared building materials and ordered several guards to remain behind and assemble a stable. Dias becomes increasingly uncomfortable accepting so much generosity. Alna, however, forgets every trace of restraint the moment she learns that the 4 horses belong to their household. She runs over, embraces each horse, then throws her arms around Dias and happily calls him her wonderful husband. Camerot and his guards are forced to witness the entire affectionate display, while Dias cannot decide whether to respond to her happiness or save himself from being squeezed too tightly. As they return to the village beneath the evening sky, Alna explains that her family was never wealthy. Her greatest childhood dream was to become the wife of someone whose household owned horses. For people raised on the grasslands, horses represent a secure home and a prosperous life. Alna always believed that Dias's ability and hard work would eventually help her reach that dream. She simply never expected it to happen so quickly. She briefly mentions an unreliable older brother, but does not explain the story behind him. Alna apologizes for becoming so excited that she embraced Dias in front of everyone. He tells her that he is not angry. He may not have accepted such behavior from another woman, but with Alna, he does not mind. He only asks her to show slightly more restraint in public. It is not quite a confession, but it clearly gives her a special place in his heart. Alna smiles, her eyes shining even more brightly than when she first saw the horses. Eldon's farming equipment is soon put to use. Dias personally guides a white bull pulling a large plow across the grasslands. The blade cuts through the grass and turns the soil beneath it without requiring every patch to be cleared in advance. Klaus watches the newly formed rows in amazement before May calls him over and teaches him how to hold the plow. A man once accustomed to handling a sword now finds himself struggling with a wooden frame. Farming is less dangerous than war, but it is still perfectly capable of exhausting both arms. The elderly villagers once dismissed as burdens by their former homeland now become Ilk's greatest source of experience. May recommends allowing the soil to rest for 3 days before planting and using ash from grass and wood to improve it. Dias divides the test field into 2 sections. One receives ash, while the other is treated with humus stone. If either method succeeds, the village will have hope. They also begin planning a reservoir because the nearby stream is small and may dry up during summer. Klaus immediately accepts responsibility for digging it. During the war, he excavated so many defensive trenches that the work has become almost instinctive. While everyone prepares the field, Alna sends Sinai and Ihan to call Dias back for dinner. The girls cling to his clothes and ask whether farming is difficult. Then they ask whether he would feel sad if he worked hard, but still failed. Dias calmly answers that if someone has truly done everything possible and the result still does not meet their hopes, they must eventually accept it. The girl's real concern lies behind another question. Would he be upset if they were hiding something from him? Dias does not force them to reveal it. He draws a clear distinction. If they deliberately concealed something harmful, he would be disappointed. However, everyone has the right to keep private secrets that do not hurt anyone. Sinai and Ihan visibly relax and run away. Dias asks about the subject several more times over the following days, but both remain silent. Seeing that they have become cheerful again and are playing normally with the villagers, he chooses not to pressure them. Protecting their sense of safety matters more than receiving an immediate answer. 3 days later, the experimental field is ready. Alna brings seeds from a medicinal herb capable of sprouting after only 1 night, allowing them to quickly determine whether the soil has improved. At the same time, the new stable beside the village is completed. Camerot explains that all the wood was prepared in advance. His team only had to transport the pieces and assemble them according to Eldon's instructions, allowing the structure to be finished in 3 days. Dias wants to show his gratitude and prepares several crates of Earth Dragon materials for the Kazdex party to take home. The moment Camerote and his guards hear the quantity, their faces lose all color. The value of the gift is far greater than the cost of building the stable. Some even wonder whether Dias is planning something, but he genuinely wants only to repay their help. Camerat reluctantly accepts under the interpretation that the materials are merely being entrusted to Kazdex and will later be used in a way that benefits both territories. When the caravan departs, Sinai and Ihan become sad about saying goodbye to people who spent several days in the village. Alna comforts them and reminds the girls that they still have to feed the horses. Responsibility quickly draws them away from their sadness. Diaz returns to the field. The following morning, sprouts genuinely emerge, but everyone is weak, yellow, and drooping as though life has already exhausted them. Diaz does not give up immediately. He assumes that the soil did not rest long enough and plants another batch. The following day produces the same result. He then concludes that the amount of treatment material was insufficient and adds more humus stone. Another day passes, but the sprouts still die or fail to develop. Diaz looks increasingly exhausted, yet he continues wanting to experiment. Alna finally places a hand on his shoulder and stops him. Too much humus stone may damage the soil, and continuing will only waste their remaining seeds. Looking at the withered rows, Diaz accepts the failure. They tested ash, humus stone, and repeated planting, but none of their current methods works. He does not become angry or blame anyone. He simply says that some things will not succeed no matter how much effort a person gives them. If farming is impossible for now, he will concentrate on performing his other duties well. His response mirrors the answer he previously gave Senai and Ihan. Hidden behind the fence, the two girls have heard everything. Ihan feels sad because she wants to help her adoptive father but does not know what she can do. Senai holds the necklace left by their parents. Together, they quietly call for their mother and father and ask them to reveal a path forward. At that moment, both necklaces emit blue light. A faint voice suddenly reaches them, repeatedly calling for help. The girls look at each other and confirm that neither imagined it. Someone nearby is genuinely trapped. Senai and Ihan follow the voice toward the storage area. Among the wooden crates, sacks, and rolls of cloth, the desperate call grows increasingly clear, coming from somewhere inside the darkness. Senai and Ihan work together to open a chest buried beneath a pile of belongings and discover a beast woman inside. The moment she is released, the woman repeatedly thanks the two girls and introduces herself as Ima Jellyboa, a member of the large-eared Jerboa folk. Although she looks no bigger than a child, Ama immediately emphasizes that she is already an adult. Even the book and glasses she carries were made by her personally to support her studies. Ama explains that members of her tribe secretly followed Camerat's caravan and intended to cause trouble for Diaz, while she herself was merely caught up in the situation. Ever since arriving in Ilk, she has remained trapped inside the storage area. Hearing this, Sinai and Ihan quickly realize that Ama may be the perfect outsider to ask about something they cannot yet reveal to Diaz or anyone else in the village. Ama has barely escaped from the chest before she is pulled directly into the sisters' greatest secret. After hearing the entire story, Ama confirms that Senai and Ihan are actually forest people, a race that lives deep within forests, protects plant life, and eventually becomes part of the forest itself. When a member of the forest people approaches death, they can transfer their strength and knowledge into a seed and leave it behind for someone precious to them. Their abilities are also directly connected to plants. They can channel magical energy into vegetation to accelerate its growth while creating barriers capable of repelling disease and harmful miasma. Sinai and Ihan are still too young, so at present they can do little more than make seeds sprout or create barriers over a limited area. Ama immediately understands why their parents warned them never to let humans witness these abilities. If greedy people learned what the girls could do, the two children could easily be turned into tools. Ima asks why Sinai and Ihan chose to remain with Diaz if their parents warned them so strongly about humans. The girls admit that they initially considered running away in order to keep their promise. The longer they lived in Ilk, however, the more they realized that Diaz was completely different from the humans they had been taught to fear. His enormous hands are remarkably gentle whenever he cares for them, while his clumsy but warm way of speaking reminds them of their parents. Alna, Klaus, the elderly women of the village, and even the Mir herd have always treated them like family. The problem is that Diaz continues working in the fields every day, experimenting with everything from wood ash to humus stone, only to watch each new sprout wither away. Sinai and Ihan can sense that something is draining energy from the land. If the problem continues, crops have almost no chance of surviving. Stopping it would require a barrier created by the forest people. The girls believe Diaz would never exploit them if he learned the truth, but they still do not want to betray their parents' final request. Ama quickly proposes a simple solution. Wait until everyone falls asleep, sneak into the fields, and create the barrier in secret. That way, no one will ever know. After nightfall, Ama leaves the storage area first to scout the route. With eyes capable of seeing clearly in darkness, she slips between the tents and makes her way towards Sinai and Ihan, who are sleeping beside the Mir. Along the way, she has to pass extremely close to Diaz and becomes especially cautious because she has no desire to wake the famous dragon slayer. Fortunately, he remains sound asleep. Ima eventually wakes the sisters and urges them to leave quickly before sunrise. The plan should have been simple from there, but it nearly collapses at the very first step. Sinai and Ihan are clearly terrified of the dark. Normally, whenever they have to go outside at night, they ask Diaz or Alna to accompany them. Even with Ama guiding the way, their steps become noticeably slower. At that moment, the two necklaces containing the seeds left by their parents begin to glow faintly. Sanai and Ihan softly call for their mother as though asking for a little more courage, then take each other's hands and continue forward. Ima realizes that the memory of their parents is quietly helping the two children keep moving. At the experimental field, Sanai and Ihan stand side by side, hold hands, and simultaneously recite an incantation in the language of the forest people. Light from their necklaces spreads across the ground, and green magical energy gradually expands into an enormous dome covering the fields. Streams of light sink into the soil where every previous attempt had failed. Before long, healthy green begins appearing among the weak sprouts. The girls immediately brighten with joy now that their task is complete, while Ima finally relaxes after seeing a secret plan carried out by three small figures actually succeed. The hardest part, however, comes when they return. Sanai and Ihan are so exhausted that the moment they reach the tent, they pull Ama between them and fall fast asleep. The Jerboa woman desperately tries to escape because she knows she will certainly be discovered in the morning, but both sisters are already sleeping far too deeply to release her. While Ilk remains asleep, stories about Diaz and Eldon are already spreading far beyond the village. In Kazdex, people discuss rumors that Eldon will soon travel to the royal capital and present the Earth Dragon magic stone he received from Diaz to the king in order to gain formal recognition as a lord. What excites the crowds even more, however, are the stories surrounding the Dragon Slayer. Some claim Diaz has a demi-human wife, while others say the couple are so affectionate that they openly show it in front of everyone. After passing through enough mouths, even Alna's race becomes wildly misidentified. More importantly, Ilk's recruitment notice has begun producing real results. The announcement clearly states that new residents will receive housing and food assistance, with the main restrictions applying only to criminals and dangerous individuals. As a result, many beastmen are beginning to pay attention to a territory that almost no one previously cared about. At the same time, the incident involving the desert folk who secretly followed Kamerot's caravan has left behind a suspicious clue. The troublemakers claim that someone connected to the monkey folk encouraged them to act. At first, the testimony was dismissed as an excuse to avoid responsibility. Then other people began reporting that they too had been approached and provoked by a figure whose entire body was wrapped in black cloth. Once several unrelated stories begin describing the same kind of person, coincidence becomes increasingly difficult to believe. Sure enough, in a corner of the city, a silver-haired man fumes over another failed plan, clenches his fist, and swears that he will kill Diaz. Beyond Ilk, the change of power in Kazdex has also begun disturbing the political balance in the royal capital. The previous lord controlled Western trade and provided major financial support to second Prince Mazer. Eldon, however, has deliberately kept his distance, meaning Mazer has suddenly lost one of his most important supporters in the struggle for succession. Some believe this gives first Prince Richard the advantage, but the three princesses have not abandoned their ambitions either. Even Diane, previously considered the candidate with the weakest chances, unexpectedly leaves the capital with nearly 200 soldiers and several dozen wagons loaded with provisions. The scale of the movement is large enough to make ordinary troops wonder whether a war is about to begin. Diane's true objective, however, remains unknown. The following morning, Alna wakes to a sight capable of instantly removing every trace of sleepiness. Between Senai and Ihan lies another small, long-eared creature sleeping peacefully. Alna does not find the scene adorable. She immediately sees a hygiene problem. She drags both girls and Ama away for a thorough herbal bath, explaining that rodents can carry dangerous diseases, and anyone who brings one into their sleeping area must be cleaned from head to toe. Ima barely has time to protest that she is an adult woman before being placed into a separate tub. Afterward, all three are made to sit properly before Diaz and Alna and reflect on what they did. Diaz initially suspects that Ima may be connected to the group that previously attacked the village, but Alna's soul appraisal shines a deep blue, confirming that she carries no malicious intent. Their caution quickly decreases. Sanai and Ihan are clearly sorry for secretly bringing a stranger into their sleeping area, but when asked why they did it, both refuse to explain. Diaz does not pressure them. He believes they must have their own reasons and decides to wait until his daughters are ready to tell him themselves. At that moment, May suddenly rushes over and calls Diaz to the experimental field. The sprouts that repeatedly withered in the past have now grown into a healthy green circle. Even stranger, the thriving plants cross directly through both the soil treated with ash and the sections containing humus stone, meaning the result does not follow the boundaries of either cultivation method Diaz had been testing. May and Alna nearly treat the site as a miracle, believing Diaz's persistence has finally been rewarded. Diaz alone remains uncertain about the true cause. Still, when he sees Alna smiling so happily, he says that what makes him happier than seeing the field recover is simply seeing her this joyful. The uncomplicated remark is enough to make Alna blush. Before the village can finish celebrating, another unusual visitor arrives in Ilk. A small winged creature capable of speaking emerges from a cargo box. Dias is startled but quickly apologizes for his rude reaction. The newcomer introduces himself as Jarrett, a member of the Pigeon Folk and part of Eldon's messenger corps. Jarrett carries an urgent letter explaining that the small dog folk have become extremely interested in Ilk's recruitment announcement. He explains that the dog folk come in both large and small varieties. The larger kind are stronger and more humanoid, while the smaller kind resemble dogs much more closely but possess weaker physiques. The small dog folk heard stories about Ilk from members of their race who had already visited. After learning that the territory does not discriminate between humans and demi-humans, many began hoping to settle there. Senai and Ihan immediately become excited at the possibility of adorable little dog people coming to the village. Diaz, however, refuses to decide alone. He says they must first ask the people already living in Ilk. Only if the existing residents agree will he welcome the newcomers. Diaz also privately asks Alna what she thinks about accepting more residents. She says that she will support whatever decision he makes. Diaz reminds her that if she ever has concerns, she must speak honestly because he does not need someone who simply agrees with everything he says. Alna immediately declares that this is exactly why she is the greatest wife Diaz could ever ask for, leaving him frozen halfway through what was supposed to be a statement about how deeply he trusts her. Not long afterward, Ama also asks for permission to live in Ilk. Diaz wonders why she does not return to Eldon's territory and wait for an opportunity to go back to her homeland. Ama explains that she wants to remain near Sinai and Ihan, help them, and watch over their growth. She can also read, write, and perform calculations, so she could teach the children or take on any other work the village requires. Alna has no objection. She gives Ama only one very clear condition. She must always maintain proper hygiene. The peace does not last long. Early the next morning, Alna suddenly wakes Diaz because her detection magic has sensed a group of living creatures approaching very closely. Since she has only just woken up, she notices them later than she normally would. The signals include many small life forms and one abnormally large one. Diaz guesses that the smaller group may be the new dog folk, so the two rush outside before properly preparing themselves. In the distance, they indeed see a group of small beastmen running desperately across the grasslands. Unfortunately, the creature following them is not an escort. It is an enormous snake. Diaz innocently wonders whether the giant newcomer might also be hoping to join the village, forcing Alna to pull him back to reality. The creature is a monster known as a Rick anaconda. Only then does Alna realize that in their rush from the tent, she forgot to bring her bow. Diaz also has neither his armor nor his battle axe. The moment desperate cries for help echo across the grasslands, however, Diaz charges straight toward the monster with nothing in his hands.